Hey guys, Adrian Vipers here from Washington, D.C., born and raised. Today, what we're making for lunch is a Guyanese favorite, some cook-up rice with greens, fried plantains, and a few other little fixings. But that's been a Guyanese traditional favorite dish of mine growing up all the way through my life. And since I learned how to make it, that's just one of the comfort foods that I just love to make that reminds me of home. So what I'm going to start with is preparing all the vegetables. So my mom used to teach us to just strip the greens like this so you get the stem out. And that makes it easy and you don't cook that hard stem that is really quite difficult to chew through. And nobody wants that. So you strip down the greens a little bit, pull the stems. The young shoots a little bit easier. But you want to do like this. So I'm going to make a mix of some collard greens, some turnip greens, and then we have a traditional Guyanese green that we make with salt beef and everything else, salt fish. This is callaloo, so I'm going to show you a little bit about that. Callaloo is really soft, kind of like spinach. So I like to make the mix of greens because it gives your greens a nice flavor. And then since I don't cook my greens with fat back and all that other stuff, I make a healthier version. Still very flavorful. So I let the greens and the seasonings and the herbs and spices that I put in my greens speak for themselves. So today I'm also going to add a little red cabbage to just give it a little color and a little more depth of flavor. So let's get these greens prepared. Growing up in a house with 5 kids, there was always a big pot of cook-up rice, especially on the weekends, on like Sundays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. My mom and dad would make either a big pot of cook-up rice or a big pot of soup and some kind of stew that we would always eat with rice, like you always had stew with rice. So what I'm going to do is roll these greens up in a nice little roll. I'm going to get my knife. I like to cut them in half. Roll them up a little bit, and then I do a nice bite-sized chop so that they cook much faster and you get nice even pieces. So and sometimes if I get those really big leaves of collards and turnip greens, I kind of cut them like this so that the pieces of the greens, when they go in the pot, are a little bit more even. So I'm going to put that in my pot and get that started. You want to make sure that you got nice even cuts on the greens so that everyone's greens are cooked well. I'm going to get this into the pot and I'm going to chop up my cabbage. And today we're doing cabbage and greens. I love a mix of different things, and I'm going to add a little collard to it. I'm going to get that on the pot so the greens just can start cooking down. Get my pan started heating up. And let's chop up some cabbage. Now, we don't always cook. Like when you go in restaurants, sometimes they have the cabbage. In Guyana, we don't really cook the cabbage a whole lot unless we're making like a beef stew or something like that. But red cabbage is always such a pretty favorite, especially if you're doing a coleslaw. So get that nicely chopped up. I'm not going to use the whole head of cabbage. I'm just going to use just enough to color my food and give it some nice pretty colors. My mom used to always say, make sure the plate has lots of pretty colors on it. So that's what you would do. We'll put that in my pot so that can start to cook down a little bit. And make sure all the pieces are nice and even. Okay. Let's see, and I'm going to cut my callaloo. I'm going to do my callaloo just like you would cut a spinach. So you see how soft it is? Callaloo is so delicious if you make it with saltfish, which was something that we had for breakfast quite often, especially like on Sundays and on the weekends. You would make saltfish cakes. So you make it like a crab cake or any other type of fish cake, and you season it up with onions, celery, whatever herbs you have on hand at the time, and then you make a little cake of it, put it in the pan, and you brown it nicely. So I'm going to get on my callaloo, and you don't have to remove the stem of the callaloo because it's really soft, just like spinach. So I'm going to show you real quick. So the callaloo is very soft, just like a spinach. You see? All right. So let's get that chopped up. And I'm going to get that all in my pan, in my pot, with the rest of the greens. Let that cook down on a good medium heat. And you don't need to add a lot of water to your greens because the water that's in the greens already will be enough to let the greens cook up a little bit. And you just want to kind of steam the greens. So, put that in there. All right. So I have enough of this. When you're making a good cook-up rice, I went to the butcher and I got salt beef. So this beef is already kind of set in salt water. So I want to just make nice, and this is really just to flavor it. You want nice bite-sized pieces of the beef, just so that when you bite into the rice, the beef flavoring, and you get like a little slight slither of beef in every forkful. So I'm going to cut up my salt beef, and then we're going to add that to a pan to let that saute. So I'm not making big cuts of this. This is just to add to the rice and give it a nice flavor. Sometimes now, as I've adopted a more plant-based lifestyle, I don't even make beef or chicken in my cook-up rice. I just make it with just the vegetables, the black-eyed peas, and I put the rice and I season it up. So I want to get the beef cut out. And I can get that sauteed. That's not going to take long to saute because it's not a whole lot. Okay. So let me get my pot with the vegetables. So I'm going to let that rest for a minute, and I'm going to go over here. I got to get some, instead of using onions, I'm going to put that here. Instead of using onions, I'm going to do a little shallot, and all of this is going to go in the pan with the beef. So I want all that cut up and diced up really. It doesn't have to be like a really thin cut. You want kind of like bite-sized pieces of onions so you can get a little bit of the shallot or the onions with the beef. And give it that nice, good flavor, because you always want lots and lots of vegetables to give your food some texture. So I'm going to peel that off. This was one of my favorite foods growing up. And everybody, sometimes, as you get older, you get your own spin on things, so you don't always make it traditionally. Like sometimes I make quinoa cook-up rice, and it still tastes just as good. Because you add all the same seasonings and flavors to it, but you just use different ingredients. So I'm not going to use a lot of shallots because I'm not making a huge pot of cook-up rice. Just making enough for lunch today. So I'm going to just have a couple of shallots. Get off that outer skin. And then I'll dice my shallots. I'm going to put some peppers in it, different colored peppers. And we'll be ready to get the cook up on the stove. Ready to get that going. So because these shallots are small, I'm just going to do a really small cut of shallot. Dice them up. Just enough so you're not getting a big bite of onion every time you bite in. But of course we're going to saute all this up with the beef. So it's going to cook down and caramelize nicely. And just give the beef some flavor. So here, maybe one more shallot. A lot of times I like to use spring onions, but today I'm going to use, I just have shallots on hand, so that's the best thing to use. Gives it the same flavor. So pull that off. That's enough shallots. Let's see, we're going to do some peppers. A little bit of peppers just for some color. Maybe a little yellow pepper. Just a small piece, some yellow, a little red pepper. These are the colors of Guyana, like red and yellow. Okay, so we're going to get this all in the pot and start getting this all cooking. So I got the greens back here. I'm going to stir the greens a little bit. You see the greens, it doesn't take long to cook. Once it starts to cook down, then I'm going to season it up a little bit. But for now, I just want the greens and the cabbage to just kind of soften up. I want the greens and cabbage to soften up. And then I'll season it up. I'll start mildly seasoning that so it can get a little bit of flavor going down in the seasoning water. I like to put seasoning with like really rustic peppers, garlic, some onion powder, some onion salt. I like to go light on the salt, heavy on the flavors. So I'm going to put in cracking some salt and pepper in there. If you season the greens well, you don't need fat back and all that. Now I can't lie. Growing up, my mom used to put a little smoked turkey neck in the greens, and that was delicious. But I found that if you season it well, you don't really need to put all the extra meat. And I'm going to put some 21 spice. So let that simmer down. And then I'm going to turn that a little bit so that can get in the flavors of the cabbage and the greens. And see, this is cooking just with the water from washing the greens. The water that was in the leaves of cabbage and greens when you washed it. And just let it soak. So here, I'm going to turn that fire down so that could simmer a little bit. Might add a little water to it. Not a lot. just enough for it to simmer. And then I'm going to get my rice started. Now I've already washed my rice, so I'm going to put it in the pan and start to get the cook-up rice put together. Okay. So I've washed about a cup of rice, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my rice to the pot. Because you always want to pre-wash your rice if you use it. We usually use parboiled rice, so you want to wash it because sometimes it has dirt and things in it. So I wash my rice off, add that to the pot. Let me add a little water to that. Let me get my rice started. Don't want to have a lot of water because you want all the stuff to cook just on its own. So I'm going to let the rice start to cook down. Also, when you're making cook-up rice, you want to soak the black-eyed peas in warm water overnight so that they can soften, especially if you're using the dry beans. They take a long time to cook, and you don't want your rice to cook and the black-eyed peas not to cook. So, I'm going to come over here and get my black-eyed peas. I've soaked my black-eyed peas, and I'm going to add that to the pot of rice. So I want to make sure that the black-eyed peas and the rice all cook together. So let me let you see. See, the black-eyed peas is soaked with the rice, and I'm going to let that start to cook. I'm going to add some water to it. And then the next thing that really brings the cook-up rice together is to add the coconut cream. And let me show you what the coconut cream looks like. And this is the thing I think gives cook-up rice its real nice, yummy, good, creamy flavor is coconut cream. And really any type of coconut cream will do as long as it's the black coconut cream. Now, I don't use this whole coconut cream. What you always do is just like cut half of it. And you can save the other half for later. So I'm going to clip this open, and I'm only going to use half of this coconut cream. Sometimes if you're in a pinch and you don't have the coconut cream, you can use coconut milk. But if you get this black coconut cream and you only need to use about half, I usually just measure it down like that so I can squeeze half into the pot of rice. So then I just go here. Let me turn my fire down. I don't want that overcooking. I don't want the rice to stick, so I just put the coconut cream in there. I'm going to show you what that looks like. And you want to just chop that up a little bit, soften it up, and you let that cook into your rice. So that helps the rice from sticking, and it also gives all the food that goes into this one pot dish its flavor. So I don't want to stir the rice because I'm not making rice porridge or anything like that. So I want the rice to be nice and just slightly softer than al dente. So I'm going to mix this in so the coconut cream can get down in the heat and start to cook off a little bit. I'm going to slightly stir this a little bit, and I'm going to make sure I can smell the coconut cream and everything is working together. Once I get that incorporated, then I'll start to season it up, and I'm going to get my beef started. Alright, let me stir up the greens a little bit. See, the greens are almost finished cooking. I don't need them real soft and mushy, and I want them to maintain that nice flavor and that color. So I'm going to let that simmer down a little bit, and I'll be ready to get the beef started so that the beef can go in the rice. I'm going to turn this pot down on the greens. Turn the pot down to low on the greens and let that simmer. And then I'm going to get my pot started from sauteing my beef And then cooking my fried plantains. So this is going to go down on low, very low heat, so that can that can just simmer real low. I'm going to put a dab of oil in the rice so that it doesn't stick. Just put a cap full of oil in there. Let me stir this a little bit because I don't want the rice to stick. I just want this heat to help cook the rice nice and slow. And if need be, when you're cooking cook-up rice, you can just add a little bit more water. You can add a little water as you go along. So I'm going to get that. I'm going to put some oil in my pan, saute my meat with my onions and peppers. You always want to saute your beef and your vegetables in a nice cast iron pan. So I'm going to get that nice and hot. Hear that nice sizzle. Woo-wee. All right. Let's see. We're about to make the magic happen. All right. So I'm going to get my beef. Nice layer so you can saute the beef up. I'm going to sprinkle a little seasoning on the beef. Seasoning with peppers. I always have my go-to seasonings with some peppers. I love my garlic, salt, and my rough cut garlic. I'm going to put some of that in there. Season to taste because I can always season up a little more once I finish cooking and putting everything together. I'm going to put some of my 21 seasoning spice. This is my Trader Joe's blend, but depends on what you feel like adding in that day. But garlic, onion powder, a little pepper. You don't want your beef to stick. You want it to get a nice caramelization on it, some nice color, because you always want your food to have nice color. So I'm going to let that beef, I'm going to turn that down on medium heat so that it doesn't overcook. Let me turn my greens down on low. The greens really almost look like it's finished. Because I don't like my greens to the point where it's mushy. I like it to have at least some semblance of what it came out of Mother Nature looking like. So I'm going to actually turn those greens off right now and then just let it simmer in the heat from the pot. That should be good. Okay. The rice, let me get these onions in the pot with the greens, with the meat. Get those cooked down, the onions and peppers. So I'm going to try to get these onions and peppers cooked down, caramelized up nicely and softened. So I just go through and just kind of mush down the pieces of onion. And you want this beef or whatever meat, if you use beef or chicken, you want to make sure it is thoroughly cooked before you add it to the rice. So that once it gets into the pot with the rice, it's really not cooking anymore. It's just really the flavors are coming together. So you want to make sure that's well cooked. You see that pan of meat and vegetables? It's almost like you were making a fajita. Those onions and shallots and peppers smell so wonderful. I love cooking with all these flavors because it's just like you just anticipate what all of this is going to come together tasting like. And just that first big forkful. So I'm going to leave that to cook on medium heat. I'm going to check my rice. So I'm going to turn this fire up just a little tad bit. to get some more heat going on there. I'm going to check my rice, make sure my rice is not sticking and that the rice is cooking well. And then I'm also checking to make sure that the coconut cream is melting into the rice. Let's show you. You see? So I want to make sure that my coconut cream is cooking down and melding into the rice nicely, so that once everything comes together, you want to check also every now and then, check to see that the rice is nice and soft. And that the black eyed peas are softening. So the rice is cooking nicely. You need a flat spoon to make sure I'm getting my beef nicely charred. And we always cook our beef for cook-up rice medium well. So this is not like you're eating a steak. This is because this is all going to cook together, so you want to make sure every bite is thoroughly cooked. So the onions and peppers are getting a nice caramelization on them. You see? Get those colors. Let's see, we're going to put this together in a minute. Get this cook-up rice done for lunch. Okay? So once your beef and everything has a good char on it, and all of the peppers and onions are nicely cooked thoroughly, then all we do is we're going to add this to the pot of rice. So let me pull the pot of rice back over here so you can see. I'm going to add all my beef to the rice. And then I'm going to season up all of this to make sure that it's well seasoned, because you never want to send out a plate that has not been seasoned with love. So I'm going to put all this together, and then I'm going to start to season up my rice, because at this point all the rice and everything can be seasoned up well. And you just season it to taste. You're not putting a whole lot of salt. You're using different spices. Okay. So I usually season like this because I know how much I can put in my pot without salting, and this is more seasoned than the salt. So I usually just throw some in my pan. That. I'm going to grind up some garlic, because who doesn't love good garlic? So I'm going to put some garlic in my pot. Some cracked garlic. I'm going to mix this together and see if it needs more salt. My mom used to always say, and this is a cute guy, a phrase like, oh, the meat is fresh. Needs more salt. It needs more seasoning. And then I would willingly come taste, because I was always the ready, willing, and able taste tester to tell her it needed some more of this, that, or whatever it needed. And then, you know, if you run something by a kid and they really like it, you know it's good. So let me taste that and see if it needs more salt or anything else. A little more salt. So at this point, because I've already seasoned it, I'm just going to go go light on the seasoning and the salt. So I'm just turning it. I'm not really stirring it because I don't want the rice to be mushy. So I'm stirring it and I'm turning. And I'm going to put this now on low because at this point, the cook-up rice is all incorporated and I just really want it to just simmer down and make sure all my rice is thoroughly cooked. So I'm going to turn that heat down to low. And then I'm going to just let that simmer for a second. And I'm going to get my pan heated up so that I can cook my fried plantains. So let me get the pan heated back up to put the fried plantains on. I'm going to let that heat up. Let me turn that up high so it can heat. One thing I wished I really learned how to make more before, you know, my mom went on, is her homemade bread and her homemade ice cream. Like, I'd helped her make it a million times, but I never really practiced it. But that's the one thing that I think I'm going to really practice, kind of as an homage to my mom. That coconut cream with the black eyed peas and that rice and the flavor from the beef. This is something that a good cook-up rice warms the heart every time. So I'm going to let that simmer. And I have my pan here. I'm going to make my fried plantains. So for the fried plantains, like I said before, if your plantain does not look like this, your plantain is not ready to go in that pot. It might be ready for a pot of soup where you just need green plantain. But when we make fried plantains, everyone from the Caribbean knows that your plantains must look like this. This is not rotten and this is not spoiled. This is perfect. So let me show you how it's a really easy way to cut up a fried plantain. It's no harder than cutting up any other banana. So all you do is you chop off the top and the bottom, peel it back, and then you make sideways cuts of it. And like I said, Guyanese food is very rustic. It's very comfort food. So it's not like really fussy food. It's food that, as long as you get good ingredients and you season your food well, everyone's going to love it. I like to make my fried plantains by just making like 1/2 inch diagonal cuts of the plantain. And sometimes it's always a treat to get a plantain that's a piece that's a little bit bigger, because then you know you're getting more of a treat. So just rough cut it like this. So you see the slices. So you don't want to make them too big because then they take much longer to cook. Sometimes if I get a bigger piece, then I just smush it a little bit so I can get nice even pieces. And then everybody gets something, right? So I'm going to wait for that pan to heat up, and then I'm going to get my plantains on there. We're going to be almost ready to go. Let's see. All right. So we got the cook-up rice going. I'm going to get the fried plantains on there in a second. And I like to cook my fried plantains just with a fork because it's easy to turn and you don't have to mess it up. So it looks like the oil is ready. Once you hear that sizzle, your oil is ready to go. You just put your plantains on there. This is only going to take a few minutes to cook. If you heated up your oil properly, then the plantains don't take long to cook. All you want to do is get a nice caramelization on your plantains. Man, sometimes, like, as a treat, you just make fried plantains and you have it with, like, whatever you're eating. It's sometimes hard to even get good plantains nowadays, because a lot of this stuff is getting more and more difficult for import, export. So But I lucked out and got this good plantain yesterday at the farmer's market. So, okay. So this looks like, let me just test out my rice. This looks like the rice is almost ready to go. Look at that rice. Huh? So I want to let this plantain sit so it can get a nice caramelization on each side, so that I know it's all the way cooked all the way through. Once it's ripe, it doesn't take very long to cook. So, I'm going to turn it. Let me turn my fire down. I want to make sure I cook it golden brown on both sides. Right. Looks like I'm going to turn my fire down. I'm going to turn my fire off on my rice, because I can just cook down with the heat that's there. I'm going to let the plantain sit, get my plate, and we'll be ready for lunch in a few minutes. Okay. So I'm going to get that. Let me get my plate out. See? Check and make sure that it's cooking well. Let's see, give it some more heat. Okay. Make sure all the plantains are cooking even, nothing's overcooking. Alright. So we're almost ready. I'm going to get out another second. I'm going to start taking some of these plantains off. And let them rest. I can put the rest of them on there to cook. Put the rest of them on my fire. You know what I found? The more I travel to different places, that so many different cultures have very similar foods, but maybe they season them different, or maybe they cook it for a certain meal a little bit differently. But plantain is something that anywhere in the Caribbean or Latin America, we all love. We all love a good plantain. I'm going to put some more oil on here, because I definitely don't want this to burn or stick. I'm going to put a little more oil in there, and then we'll be ready to plate in a second. And growing up with 5 kids in the house, cook-up rice and fried plantains was the thing we just most, like, we always beg my mom, can you make some cook-up rice today? And she would be like, oh, we made cook-up rice last Sunday. We're going to have something else. Let's have some fried fish or some plantain and sorrel and I'm trying to put on my Guyanese accent, you know. So, like, sometimes we would have saltfish cakes, or, oh, my mom made the absolute best curry chicken. Because, see, Guyana is a country that's really a lot of East Indians and then a lot of Afro-Caribbean people. So the culture and the food that we eat is very much heavily influenced by Indian culture. Like, I think my mom was the queen of making the best chana. And it's a really simple dish. Just chickpeas, with onions and celery and whatever other seasonings and chopped root vegetables you want to put in it, and you fry it up. And it's like something that you put on the side. Some people, like if you go to a salad bar, you might see fried chana, you might see chana, but not my mom's fried chana. Like my mom's fried chana, I literally think should have been in somebody's restaurant at some point. But anytime she took it somewhere, people would always ask for it. So I'm going to turn this down, get these flipped, and then we're almost ready for lunch. Okay, so I can turn that down and let that finish cooking, and let's get this plated up. So I have my plate here. I'm going to start with my cook-up rice. I'm going to get me a nice big mound of cook-up rice, because that's the star of the show. So I want to make sure I get me a nice big dollop of cook-up rice. So I'm going to scoop out me some cook-up rice. Because cook-up rice is one of those dishes that you could literally just eat a plate of cook-up rice. And it's like it's a delicious one-pot meal. And it stands on its own. So I'm going to get me a nice big plate of cook-up rice. Put that on there. All right. Then I'm going to get some greens out the pot. Hold on, let me get my pot holder. Okay. So I'm going to get some greens, and I'm going to put some greens on the plate. See that? The nice colors. I'm going to put some greens on that plate. And then I'm going to get some fried plantain. So I'm going to put 2 or 3 pieces of plantain on there. And for good measure, I'm just going to put a little piece of sweet red pepper. I'm going to use a piece of the sweet red pepper that I had left over. Let's see. Just for some color, and we'll be ready to eat. Just going to put a couple of pieces of red pepper. Voila, this is it. Lunch is served. I hope you've enjoyed making cook-up rice, fried plantains, and greens with me. Take good care of yourselves, guys. Bye-bye.